Hey, what's happening, tribe? It's your host, Chief Cali, checking back in for another episode of Our Story, 1968, the Indian Civil Rights Act. Now, before we crank this episode up, I wanted to start off by asking a question to you, the viewer. And that question is this. Has there ever been a time in your family where you can remember talking to more than likely an elder and they told you that they had Indian in them or they were Indian?
Are you an Indian?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I thought you were a black guy.
Hey.
You're Indian?
Yeah.
Oh, come on, man.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
gotta be
What kind
kidding
of
me.
Indian are you?
Like Tonto Indian?
Shinnecock Indian.
Really? You're a Shinnecock?
Yes.
His family was here when Columbus landed, huh?
Is that right?
Yes.
So you are not a black man, you're an Indian.
I'm an Indian.
I got so much flack because the Indians, they felt like they were being picked on or some shit. You know what I'm saying? But little did they know, Flavor Flav is a Native American too. I have Indian blood in me, and my family comes from the Shinnecock Reservation, eastern Long Island. And so does LL Cool J's family.
Got us up here thinking that all of us from Africa. I know I'm finna get ready to ruffle some feathers right now. I'm sorry, but my grandmother never told me we were from Africa. A lot of us are Indians, Black, Cherokee, Blackfoot Indians.
I'm
Like,
Geechee. We was already over here.
That's the Choctaw Indian.
I mean, really, where I first heard it from was my grandma Rose, my great grandma Rose. She was on the porch and she told me that we was Cherokee. And I was a little kid. I didn't really know. I mean, I heard of that when I was a kid. I didn't associate it with people that was, melanated people. You know what I mean? So it was just, and she was real, fair skin. So I didn't really know what was behind it all, but I knew that it was.
So when she said she was Indian, you probably associated with more of what you saw on TV.
I mean, I thought it was Americans. I thought it was like, you know how you meet people and like, yeah, I got part Chinese or something. I didn't think it was like, I didn't think of Americans. I think of black people. I think of what they call black people. You know what I mean?
Michael Jackson was born in Gary, Indiana on the 29th of August, 1958. Michael Jackson's father stated in his book, The Jacksons, that he has Native American ancestry. The name Jackson originates from his great-great-grandfather on his father's side, Jack Gale. Jack was born at the beginning of the 19th century into a tribe of Choctaw Indians.
Yeah, man, I could definitely tell you about both sides of my family. I can remember being a little boy, me and my little brother at the breakfast table eating. My grandmother's, she's in the kitchen. We're at my dad's mom's house. She's in the kitchen, she's cooking us oatmeal or something. But we're sitting at the table having a conversation. And I think the conversation was probably going along the lines of, why are we called colored people or something like that? I can't remember. I was a little kid, man. But I do remember my grandmother explaining us being colored, but I also remember my granny saying that she was an Indian. She was Indian. I'll never forget that. Then, over on my mother's side of the family, most of y'all know Steve Harvey, him and my grandmother were first cousins. You know what I'm saying? Although he looked at my grandmother as more of an auntie.
My grandmother, Steve Harvey, first cousins. Clara Harvey, genealogy over DNA. Lets me know who I am. I'm an Indian by bloodline.
You know why? That's the Choctaw Indian. Me and Slim Bull get a lot of support from our family. Our family don't give us no pushback on this Indian information, man. That's the Choctaw Indian.
Soul Manhattan to the white man, my grandfather. Step up and get knocked right the fuck out. Come to the cookout, dirty bitch. The Indian and soul Manhattan to the white man, my grandfather. The Indian and soul Manhattan to the white man, my grandfather. The Indian and soul Manhattan to the white man, my grandfather.
Many of us found ourselves becoming black African American, are very much convinced that our roots come from Africa. Because somewhere, someone gave us a slave story and told us that we all come from a place called Africa, and we came over here from the jungles of Africa on a boat into slavery here in America. So in this episode, we're going to take a close look and do some close investigating to find out where exactly did that Indian in your bloodline go. So as we start to look into that information, this is where we'll learn a whole lot about a guy named Walter Plecker and his reclassification of the American Indian.
We're not asking permission. We're going to tell our story, and you're going to listen. I'm try it.
They don't know our story. Yeah. They don't know what we've been through, baby. They're all on the outside looking in. But we still gon' do what we want to. Touching conversations. Yeah. A bunch of apologizing and explaining. But we live and we learn. Hey, I bet they ain't think that we would make it, but we overcame it. This shit ain't nothing to play with. Family over everything is still the same shit, and I wouldn't trade it for nothing. Nah, we've been through hell and back, but we're still standing. Standing on all 10. Hey, you know how we do it, we go all in. Yeah, it's us over everybody. That's why when it's trouble in paradise, nosy motherfuckers wanna hear about it. Let's be clear about it. We don't make decisions based on their opinions. We can't expect, nor can we make them see the vision, as long as we know the business. Cause they don't know our story. Yeah. They don't know what we've been through, baby. They're all on the outside looking in. But we still gon' do what we want to. When you commit this shit, you gotta keep on fighting for who and what you believe in. Believe me, cause I ain't going nowhere, baby. I'll be here till the end of time. Take no chances, I won't jeopardize. You know I won't. Cause true love only happens once. I know my past ain't pretty, yeah, but she still ride with me, yeah. You see, this ain't for everybody. When it's trouble in paradise, these nosy motherfuckers wanna hear about it. Let's be clear about it. We don't make decisions based on their opinions. We can't expect, nor can we make them see the vision, as long as we know the business. Cause they don't know our story. Yeah. They don't know what we've been through, baby. They're all on the outside looking in.
This is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
The Racial Integrity Act of Virginia was signed into law in 1924. The law was the brainchild of a physician, eugenicist, Walter Ashby Plecker. Plecker was born April 2nd, 1861. About 10 days later, Plecker's father, who was a wealthy merchant and slave owner, joined the Civil War that kicked off on April 12th, 1861. So this is the atmosphere that Plecker was born in. He was a staunch white supremacist, white nationalist. He basically grew up in the elite society of the antebellum South. And he was sent to, I think it's called Staunton, Virginia, to complete his elementary school years. He then joined a military academy and then later on went to Maryland University and graduated with his medical degree. When he first graduated, he went into obstetrics, and he worked with women of all races. His mother was instrumental in women's health, and he stayed in that particular field until she died in 1915. After 1915, he became a public health systems doctor in one of the counties in Virginia. I'm not real sure exactly what it is right at the top of my head, but he did that for a while, and that was around, I guess, 1912, 1914. And then after his mother died, he started looking at other avenues, and he took a job finally as Virginia's first vital records registrar in 1912. And he stayed there until about 46. Plecker was always trying to make sure that he kept racial issues in the forefront, always raising them before other white prominent people. Even within his Presbyterian church, he was a fundamentalist in the southern branch of the Presbyterian church. And his belief was that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of racial mixing. So that was kind of his catalyst for making sure that the races did not mix. And I do believe that was one of the things that really pushed him. The 1920 census was one of the real pushes for him, because he noticed from the statistics that he was able to get from the Census Bureau that there were very little people being listed as mulatto or Negro as in previous censuses. And he believed this was because a lot of people were passing as white, or that blacks were passing as, or Negroes at the time, were passing as Indians. So he did everything that he could to make sure that that did not happen, that these people stayed separate. So you saw him pushing toward, in 1924, when he made the push for the Racial Integrity Act, that was what he was aimed at. And in this act, it basically was a paper genocide. The saying that the pen is mightier than the sword. You can kill off a lot of people with the pen, but you can kill off more people with legislations and rules and laws put into place that designated who they could and could not say they were. And so you had people that previously listed themselves as Indians that were no longer able to say they were Indians. Plecker's Racial Integrity Act did not determine what race somebody was other than white and colored. If you were not white and you were Chinese, you were colored. If you were Hispanic and you were of a darker, maybe what they call a olive colored complexion, you were colored. He did not care what color you were just colored. And so a lot of Indians who were copper colored got designated as colored people, and they lost their standing as Indians. But what you see from this, you also saw that the Racial Integrity Act also included segregation policies where public places had to be segregated. A white section, a black section, the black section or the Negro section. So he was trying to just make sure that these people not only got together to procreate, but not even got together to socialize. You saw that still in the schools. This is way before, maybe 40 years before we saw the big push for integrating. But he was, very, very dogmatic about the white race staying pure. You also saw where he had the Sterilization Act, which people that were questionable about their race, but maybe were married to other people who had and they had had children with them, these girls were designated for sterilization against their will, against their knowledge. A lot of times you saw him bring them into his offices. We're saying that girls should have a health check when they start puberty, when they start to menstruate. So what he would do is these girls were basically sterilized, and this happened to people of mixed races, people who were Indian, who were of a darker hue, and it happened to a lot of black women. But this is what he did basically to ensure the survival of the white race. But if we think about that, the assignment of race was something that was practiced all the way back into slavery. And we at the beginning we said that he was born in 1861. So he would have been born into a system where this was a common practice, where they basically decided, oh, we need more slave count. Let's start counting counting Indians as Negroes. So if you go all the way back to the Congressional Conference or the Constitutional Conference of 1887, I believe it was, 1787, I'm sorry. You see where Southern men were up in arms because they were not getting the Senate representation that was available for the northern states. Northern states had given citizenship to black people, and they had also allowed immigrants to come in and become citizens. So their populations were constantly growing, whereas you didn't see that as much in the South. So at this particular constitutional conference, the 3/5 compromise was reached. In this compromise, slave owners were allowed to count their slaves as 3/5 of a person. So that allowed them to gain more Senate representation and allowed them to pass more laws that were agreeable to their way of life in the South. Okay, since the practice of misassigning race for Indians was in practice since slavery, more than 50,000 Indian men, women, and children had been misassigned by the time slavery ended. So even before Plecker began his cutting away and his dirty work, these people were already misassigned. And, it was political. It was political. Like I said, the revisit of the 3/5 compromise made slave owners more apt to kidnap Indians or those Indians that work alongside them to enslave them, enlist them on their property counts so that they could get more Senate representation, and so that a lot of the issues that the South wanted to be represented on the House and in the Senate floors would be, brought to the forefront because they would have more representation. So that basically most of the things that are done in documentation and in numbering people are political. And so if you keep that in mind, you'll understand why somebody like Plecker was able to just do what he did and why it didn't seem like a big thing to him. But Plecker's belief that no real Indians still existed by the time he passed the act. He believed that there were mongrels and they had mixed with, the Chinese, and they had mixed with the black people, and they were just all mixed up. So the only pure people were white people. And at the time, there were even discrepancies on the Europeans that were considered white. But, this man just had a whole lot of issues with him being white and how fragile the mindset was that to retain that particular racial designation for him is really astounding.
Basically, they couldn't kill the Indians off the way that they wanted to kill the Indians off, so they had to reclassify us on paper, We talking about the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. This is very monumental because when we look at them old pictures, what do we see? We see a whites only water fountain, and then we see a colors only water fountain. Who are those colored people? Y'all gotta answer that question for us. Who were those colored people? We know who those colored people is. Okay, boom, now let's rewind it. Let's go back to the Racial Integrity Act. The Racial Integrity Act, what do you see? They said they reclassified those Indians as what? Colored, right? So, I never in my life heard of Native Americans being called colored. So, something ain't adding up, something ain't making sense. Where in history did this happen, and why are we the only ones that's bringing light to this happening? And now that we bringing light to this happening, they want to talk about, oh, colored meant them or colored meant this. Nah, we know who colored is. We know who colored meant. We know who the Indians is, point blank, period. But it was very treacherous. You got to understand your ability to identify. They was killing, they was hanging Indians for this. In Virginia, and it spread throughout the whole United States. It started in Virginia, but it spread. They all had to adopt these things. Because one of the problems is that you got to understand that these people need a claim somewhere. They need to claim stake somewhere. So the only way they could claim stake is to make sure that these people who were Indians no longer can identify as Indians. Because if we want to break it down and be technical, did this apply to all the Indians? No. Because there was still people able to identify as Indians. However, even if we go to the actual document, which we're going to definitely put up, the actual document, what you're going to see is who was he attacking when he reclassified Indians as colored? He was specifically attacking the Negro. And how do we know he was specifically attacking the Negro? Because he was doing that, and he said one of his motives was because he thought that the Indians was hiding Africans in the tribe. In the tribe. So, we need answers. We need answers. We're going to pose these questions and we need answers. We need concrete answers. We need sophisticated answers on who was these Negroes, who was these Indians, and who was these colored people. And if y'all can't give us answers on that, then guess what? We gonna provide the answers because we doing the diligent research. Growing up, when I heard about an Indian, when I heard about a Native American, I never in my life heard of them being called colored. But if you watch a movie and you see colored, they talking about colored people, who are they referring to? The colored people are the Indians.
Who are the real Americans? America keep changing and changing and changing. Let's go back in time when the American Indians looked like I look and roamed the southeast part of the United States freely. I love what the mayor said. We have to tell the truth.
Yeah, Indians, niggas, same thing.
One of the main plays was to reclassify the Indian. What does that do? That gives other people stake and claim to the land. The most valuable thing is the land, right? This is what everyone is coming here for, the land of the free. This land is your land. All of these things tie into what? People wanting this land. What happened is this was called the New World to who? This the old world to us. It's the new world to them. They came over here to seek what? A better life, right? And now, even to this day, it's people coming over here to do what? Seek a better life, right? But on the backs of the original people of this land. But we talk about this reclassification thing. We talk about us being the indigenous people of this land, and you got these people saying we not X, Y, and Z, but yet they got the colonizers inside their tribes running.
Now, maybe we say politically correct or not politically correct. They don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like Indians to Indians, and a lot of people are laughing at it.
Yeah, Indians, niggas, same thing.
Now, maybe we say politically correct or not politically correct. They don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like Indians to Indians, and a lot of people are laughing at it.
I look at it like this. They said, first we're going to pretend, first we're going to replace them with these people. You know what? We run everything. We ain't got to even pretend no more. We about to just full-blown join the tribes ourselves. Now you got colonizers and Europeans full-blown in the tribe. They ain't even trying to hide it no more. They ain't even trying to hide it no more. And one of the main things about reclassification that we gotta pay attention to is even on Congress.gov. Matter of fact, I got on my phone right now. I'm about to pull it up. Shit, receipts. So boom, you go to Congress.gov, right? You type in H.rep 110 to 124, right? And then you're going to see Thomasina E. Jordan, Indian Tribes of Virginia Federally Recognized Act, right? You go on there, and then you're going to scroll down to 57. And when you scroll down to 57, you're going to see something very, very important. Boom, you scroll to 57, and it says in plain sight, the Virginia Vital Statistics Bureau, right? Why is that important? Why is the Virginia Vital Statistics Bureau important? Because that's where Walter Plecker was the head of. So I'm about to reiterate again. Boom. The Virginia Vital Statistics Bureau classed all non-reservation Indians as Negro. Who were the Negroes in history? They classified them as Negroes, so we gotta ask these questions. Who were these Negroes?
Negro voter registration has already more than doubled. Now with this bill, the voice of justice speaks again. It proclaims that fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life. We affirm through law that men equal under God are also equal when they seek a job, when they go to get a meal in a restaurant, or when they seek lodging for the night in any state in the Union. And now the Negro families no longer suffer the humiliation of being turned away because of their race.
Who were these Negroes? Who were these colored people? These were our ancestors. So when we talk about reclassification, yes, it was a very real thing. And this is one of the main things that becomes a problem when it comes to us identifying ourselves to this day. But if you do paperwork, you do anything that you do, you got to identify who you are. Why are they asking that? If who you is don't matter, why are they asking you on every application to identify yourself? I need y'all to think about this.
Yeah, man. Walter Plecker, man. Walter Plecker is one of them people. If I'm not mistaken, he was the first registrar in Virginia. Had his hands on reclassifying the indigenous people, man. He was involved in the Bureau of Vital Statistics or whatnot. And he had his hands in turning all of the American Indians into, Negroids and Negroes and coloreds and things of that nature. And, it's there to be discovered. It's there to be discovered.
American Indians of blood classified as Black, Negro or Mulatto on census records. Since the beginnings of the Africa slave trade in America, many Native American persons have unfortunately to the detriment of Indian heritage, were listed as black, mulatto, or Negro in order for white slave owners to keep an ample supply of slaves. Many blood Indians have lost a God-given heritage due to slavery in southern state, in which approximately 24,000 or more full-blood American Indians of color, men, women, and children alike, were forced by white slave owner to take part in slavery, and with that travesty starting from the first census ever taken in America, Indians were falsely listed on all census records as Negro, black, or mulatto, an error which was passed down from generation to the present. If you know you're Indian and don't know why you can't find census records stating this, it is because of white census takers being instructed to ignore Indian heritage and paint mostly southern states in America with either black or white populations. Go over you grandparents' oral history, and if you are a person of color and have a strong family history of Indian blood and census records that don't match, you are more than likely of Indian heritage and have had your heritage stripped from you.
Let's see how they turned the Indian into the Negro. The Negro Act of 1740 turned Indians not at peace with the government into slaves in the 18th century using pen and paper. And then these Indians that they declared to be slaves were then declared to be extinct. The Racial Integrity Act was another act of paper genocide on American Indians. Negro Act 1790. Section 1, the Act of 1740, Section 1 declares all Negroes and Indians, free Indians in amity with the government, Negroes, mulattoes, and mestizos who are now free, accepted to be slaves, the offspring to follow the condition of the mother, and that such slaves are chattels personal. Skin tone was the evidence that made a slave a Negro, mestizo slave, or an Indian slave. What in their eyes was the Negro color and the Indian color. Natives, the ones people think of when they think of natives, sure don't go around talking about getting enslaved in the 18th century and made extinct due to this act, do they? Generally, they barely ever talk about being enslaved at all, but the Indians were, which is why we call ourselves Indians and not Native Americans. Section 3, Indians and the descendants of Indians are regarded as free Indians. Well, who are the free Indians? These are the free Indians. So there were Indians who were at peace with the government at the time and Indians who were not. Once they made Indians who weren't at peace with the government into slaves through this act, they declared these Indians extinct on paper. They were now slaves instead of Indians. These are classes and statuses. Their descendants inherited their slave status passed on by the mother. Negro, black became their new slave statuses, and their descendants and people who had a certain phenotype that they deemed to be so-called black or seemed to have a little more black in them are now classified as black and African American. Remember, we talked about the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. It proclaimed the existence of only two racial categories, colored and white. The law stripped Native Americans and members of other groups with dark skin of their land, voting rights, and legal identity. The fight for our freedom started in 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation, but this is the Civil Rights Act, aka the Indian Civil Rights Act, aka Rat Brown Law. Now, what's that? It's when Herbert Rat Brown made it possible for us to vote. Yes, all of these laws and legislations are about us.
So with the Walter Plecker and around that area, one of the things you have to remember at all times are the times, the dates. When did all this stuff happen? Because sometimes things will happen in the 1700s and we'll talk about them like they happened in the 1900s. The date, what was going on when Walter Plecker was saying these things?
Look, y'all, I'ma drop this gem on y'all and I'ma let y'all go, man. I'ma let y'all go. Watch this. This is the Indian training schools. They had schools to teach them how to be Indians. Watch this, y'all. Nah, look what it said. What did they do in the Indian training schools? Watch this. They taught them such things they taught them such as farming and housekeeping. Now come on y'all. If they from this land, why they teaching them how to farm this land? I want you to go to the Library of Congress and pull up the information about their farming schools. About their Indian schools, y'all. Come on now. Why they gotta teach people that's from here how to farm here? Now watch this. You see how it said that the school stopped in the 1930s? You know why? Because at that point, Walter Plecker had already made the Indians Negroes. I want you to go look into Walter Plecker, how he turned the Indians into Negroes. I'm been knowing that. I knew that years ago. In 1924, they came up with a thing called the Indian Removal Act. And the reason why they stopped the schools, you want to know why they stopped the schools? Because at that point, they thought that they had took all the Indian out of us. But they didn't understand that our family was passing it down orally. Told us what we was. Why the fuck we gotta lie about that? And why y'all... And another thing I want y'all to understand, right? Watch this. Back to the Indian training schools. Now, they was teaching them also how to speak English. Forced to speak English. Now, come on, y'all. Now, if they say they got us from West Africa, where's our Indian training schools? Oh, how can I put this? Where's our West African training schools? Where they teaching us to speak English? Huh? How was we able to communicate with the slave masters to teach us how to farm and all that stuff? Huh? You can't teach nobody how to do nothing unless you speak in their language. And y'all act ignorant as if y'all don't know that. How can I teach you anything if I don't speak your language? That's because we was already speaking English already, y'all. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people had their certain dialects, like certain people, like even to this day, like even in different states, people say different shit and it mean different shit. What is our training schools to teach us English? They bought them from y'all know where.
What was the main things that was happening? If you think about it, a lot of our people were coming in off the land. They were getting jobs in these cities. They were getting into the Industrial Revolution. And when all those people came up, it was a lot. Because a lot of times they like to say that we're the minority. Where do you go in the world and the indigenous people are the minority? You don't. So they had to put it in not just our minds, but everybody else's minds too. That's why today you'll see what you're saying, why people get mad, because they were taught, no, you the Indians. No, you are. And all Indians are what would you call an Indian? People who did work, contract work, independent, indigenous. Those were those people. Those were you. You're the one coming off the land, so you know how to do all the work. You know how to do everything. Everything that everybody does, they learned it from you. Unfortunately, you think you came from somewhere else, so you wipe all of that out. See, that's the purpose of reclassifying you. So like my grandmother and grandfather, they wasn't on that African stuff. They're like, what are you talking about? So you had to get rid of them and teach their kids certain things. So one of the things, how they taught you were African, we'll get right back to the Walter Plecker, but this has to be said. They started bringing in movies, TV, radio to teach you and so my grandparents were born in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They came off the farms and the land. So when they moved to the city, their children had to be educated in this system that we wanted to get into. And they just started training them totally different from what their parents were taught or what their parents knew. Because if you go back to your grandparents, great-great-grandparents, it'll be said that, oh, they only had a 6th grade education. Oh, they only had a 3rd grade education. But they were genius. So this cat, Walter Plecker, these people filling into these cities, Walter Plecker had to say, you know what? We got to reclassify these cats and meld ourselves into their culture. That was the Racial Integrity Act. They're trying to get rid of you and try to tell other people, try to use other terms and names to let other people slide in. And it worked.
Like as far as the gentleman Walter Plecker, who I think it was 1922 or 23, came up with the Reclassification Act, which is just another one of their strategies to change the narrative to suit their goals. You know, and basically you can Google Walter Plecker, you can Google anything nowadays and find that information that was one of the means of taking the people off of the land. When you call somebody something other than what they are, and you're in a powerful position like the position that he was in, these things turn into laws. You know, so this is how we basically got into a situation that our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers and everything went from being Choctaw and Chitimacha and Cherokee to being Negro, colored, mulatto, and all of these kind of things that disconnects you from the land. The same as saying that basically your ancestors are from Africa takes you off of this land. And that is to the benefit of the adversary, you know, because in reality, all people who look the way that we look didn't get to this land on the slave ship. Our ancestors were already here and had been here millennia before there was a Europe or a European.
And here in Louisiana, the Walter Plecker of Louisiana was Naomi Drake. And I want everybody to know this woman's name because she was more devastating than Walter Plecker. She stopped marriages. She did so many things that were so evil towards the indigenous people of Louisiana that it was really, really, really perplexing how she got away with all of that.
Yet I would like to speak about Walter Plecker dealing with the reclassification that he done against Aboriginal people in Virginia, which actually became the template for all vital statistics in the so-called 50 states of the United States of America. When people went into the hospitals, right, with their nationality of being tribal people, he would take and classify those who were light-skinned as being white and those who was of melanin hue as being colored. And when they come out of the hospital dealing with paperwork, that's when the paper terrorism actually began, you know, which they've been doing paper terrorism or paper genocide against we the Aboriginal people of this land mass, which is now called North America. And it has never stopped. They still do reclassification when you go fill out an application for a job or an application to get a loan or an application to go to school or an application just to trying to get a house, you know what I'm saying, dealing with homestead acts and everything. So they still have you putting down colored or African American or Negro or black, even dealing with the United States Census, they still have you being reclassified. But the thing is, once the pen is in your hand and you have knowledge of self and your family of being the Indians with your grandmother, your great-grandmother and grandfather, your great-grandfather been told you, you're supposed to sign that. And that's how you actually take control of basically reclassifying yourself back into the family of nations. And that's your responsibility and duty, You know, you don't let nobody else classify you, you know, and that's where it comes down to, you know, because even with the application, I actually asked my little cousin. She was like, well, I put black and I put / African American. I said, well, what's the difference between black and African American? You know what I'm saying? And you know you're Indian. But she said, I don't want to go through all that, Pop. I said, why not? I say, you have a pen. The power is the pen. So you got it. Put who you are. Don't be ashamed. And you know what? Some people do be ashamed to put that they are Indian. You know, and I think that came from the 70s too, because that also transpired because, you know, with the Black Power movement going on in the 70s, they would try to make those who claim to be Indians feel less than who they were because they used to get picked on to say, oh, that person don't want to be black. They talk about they got Indian in their family or they are the Indian, you know, and it would shame the people. So the people would be like, well, okay, they would bow down and say that they was black or Afro-American at that time in the 70s and the 80s, you know. So it actually there's self perpetuation and continuation of them being reclassified. So now they're doing it amongst themselves now, unconsciously not knowing that they're doing mass genocide against themselves, dealing with paper genocide, you know. But this season, 2010, I think, when they did the U.S. Census, they took Negro off there. Like what Barack Obama said, well, once they took Negro off, then what you gonna call yourself now? You know, this gave you the opportunity to correct your status. So what Walter Plecker did, it still plagues our people to this very day. You know. So now what we have to do is, once again, no petition is not gonna get them to reclassify that they classified to be reclassified of who they're supposed to be. You don't go to them and ask to be reclassified. No, the power is in your hand when you have the pen. And you say, well, I remember my grandmother say this, so I'm going to go ahead and put that on the application. This is who I am. Because when they say Native American or American Indian or Alaskan Native, you check that box and you put where your tribe is. you put what your tribe is. So who going to deny it? You know, just like dealing with the DRIP, you know, dealing with the Declaration of Rights of the Indigenous People. You have that right to classify yourself with your parents and them told you, your grandparents. So the power is in your hand.
Man, Walter Plecker. Woo. That man, boy. Man. You know, when we talk about you know, who we are as a people, at one point I think we knew who our family was. You know, we knew where we came from. What Walter Plecker did was he pretty much grouped and categorized us into one category, you know, one classification. So that's what they call reclassification. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, the people who were here were killed off, you know, and we can go by whatever name you want to go by. You know, those are arguments in itself, but let's just say, you know, he was responsible. He worked, one we got to understand, he worked for the city or the state at the time, the government. Let's just say the government, right? He was in charge of pretty much. It was a type of a census. You know, they'll let you know exactly who's where, what area, what they were called. Most of the time, people were pretty much classified by what's in the area that they were in. So you get, you know, it was a lot of descriptive terms. So they say it was thousands of tribes here at one particular time. You know, what were those tribes' names? A lot of tribes went by last names. A lot of tribes went by areas. But what Walter Plecker did was he went and took all of those different tribe people, the people who were in different tribes, classified them into colored, it evolved, but colored was the main thing. So now, instead of you knowing exactly who you are, now you're just in this one thing. The problem with that is it allowed anybody to be able to classify themselves as that. for different benefits. So when you start talking about the $5 Indian and paying to get on different roads and in order to gain land benefits or whatever type of government benefits at the time, it could be tax write-offs, it was so much. I'm not even gonna say it was so much going on. It was pretty much the same thing going on now. You know, that we don't know. Anytime you go into a court, anytime you get a letter in the mail, they say, oh, you got to pay this tax, or you have to pay this, or you have to pay that. All you're doing is just signing yourself into the system. That's all he was in charge of. Hey, you want a piece of this? Here, sign up. Problem is, he allowed anybody to do it. Our issue was socially. Once schooling and everything started to come about, the people that did go to school, they started thinking that they was better than the next man. You know, so they thought their information was a little better than the next person's information. So now we're stuck in literally whatever they reclassified us as, that's what we're gonna call ourselves now. So now, you know, that grew into, you know, it's what it was, colored, then Negro, then colored, or colored, then Negro, then you got black. I remember at one point, black was fighting words amongst us. You know, if you called the next person black, that was offensive, you know? But what Walter Plecker did, it was just on paper. It was all paper. So when they say, yo, a lot of these indigenous, I don't even like to say, I'll say Indian tribes that were here, they got killed off by, what they say, smallpox and different wars, or whatever the case may be. This is all paper genocide. This is what they mean. So if we're all in a classroom and we're all Indian, and we know that we're Indian, and they say, okay, all Indians raise their hand, and we all raise our hand, okay, that means we're here, right? The next day, if they say, well, you can be Indian or you can be black and get this benefit, if that benefit is good enough, most of the time you're gonna sign up as black. That's, or colored, or whatever it was at the time, and that's pretty much what it was. So now, if we're in the classroom the next day and you tell people to raise their hand, are you Indian, and nobody raised their hand, what happened to the Indians? They disappeared? Nah, they just was reclassified, or they wasn't reclassified. They claimed something different. They volunteered themselves into something that has no benefit for them. It may look like it has a benefit. It's no benefit, man. You know what I'm saying? All they're doing is just taking our land, taking our rights. Anything that we have for us that's from here, they taking it, sending it back to wherever they coming from. You know what I'm saying? But that Walter Plecker thing, man, that thing was serious. Yeah, you can say he killed us off. It was on paper. Once you understand that, it opens up, once again, that information, man. But it wasn't even just Walter Plecker, man. It goes back before him. It was a guy in the early 1800s. I can't think of his name. I could get that for you. But it was another guy in the 1800s who, same situation. That's probably where Walter Plecker got it from. You know what I'm saying? But when you get to that, once you get to the understanding that all of this stuff is just paperwork, we volunteering ourselves out of our rights, you'll start to see, like, okay, this is who they was talking about at the time, or this is what they was talking about at the time. But, you know, if you stay indoctrinated on what you learn and never question what you learn, it's gonna be it's gonna be a rough road for you. You know what I'm saying? You're just kind of gonna be a victim of war, just cause. You know what I'm saying? What do you call them? Innocent bystanders. It's kind of what you'll be if you don't really dig into this stuff. You really at least question what you know. You know, if you question what you know and you find out the same thing, kudos to you. You know what I'm saying? Kudos to you. But 9 out of 10 times, if you question what you know, you're not gonna find that same thing. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, that reclassification, man, it's been done over and over. We the only ones that had our name changed. How many times? Like I said, it was Negro, it was colored, it was African American, it was black, it was, you know what I'm saying? Like, what is it? What we gonna be? You know what I'm saying? And now you got everybody claiming black. This wasn't like this in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? But this, once again, this is all reclassification. This is all droppings from Walter Plecker and the people who done it before that. You know what I'm saying? But once you go back to that reclassification, man, it gets serious. You walk yourself up, you'll see who the Indians were, you'll see who, whatever tribe you hear, the Cherokee, the Choctaws, Chatas. I mean, it's like I said, it's thousands of tribes, y'all. And once you realize like it's thousands, man. You can't. Information new every day, so you know it gets a little murky once you know. It gets real murky until you really understand that. Excuse me. Excuse me. It gets murky once you understand that they reclassified us on paper, and they started making laws that we couldn't even claim certain names. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was illegal to be Indian. You know, at least I came across that information, but they were saying it was illegal to be an Indian at one point. You know, so that's why you get a lot of these elder people that's still here. They'll talk about it, but they really won't talk about it. You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense. You know, you'll get the, oh yeah, we had Indian in our family, or you know, you gotta investigate that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you know, some people say, oh yeah, well I heard we had slaves in the family. Cool. Go back and look and see what a slave was as well. All of this stuff is just classifications put on people, you know, and as it kept going, you can kind of see it. Like, you know, what we talking about now, our story, man. Dr. Martin Luther King, when he was marching, Indians, it said Indian Civil Rights Act. We got to look into that. Where were those people? You know what I'm saying? You have to investigate. You know what I'm saying? So once you go back, and like I said, this the name of the game is the land. That's the name of the game, the land. If the people was here don't know that this is their land, and you can reclassify them out of their land, then that's free land. All of this is right in front of our face. We still do it to this day, man. Like, I mean, with everything, man. Like, I hear it daily. Like, if it's some money or some type of whatever somebody considers valuable attached to it, most people gonna be like, yo, oh yeah, I'm that today. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I want to be a Jew. Oh, I want to be well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that word. I don't know if it's so sensitive these days, but, you know, and they say that in good, I understand what they're saying. Like, the people, there's certain groups of people in this world who operate, I say clean cut. You know, this is the deal, this is the deal. The deal gets done, you know? It seems like with us being reclassified, we don't really know exactly who we are. And that makes us jump from lily to lily. Every time we hear something like, oh yeah, okay, Black Lives Matter, let's jump over here. Oh nah, Black Lives Matter, but not that Black Lives. Like, it's like, come on, yo, we gotta really get to the core of this. Like, and once again, we was reclassified over and over and over. You know, it's two other people that was around Walter Plecker time, and what people have to understand, it wasn't just Walter Plecker. Like, understand, these people communicated amongst each other. So what one state was doing, the next area was probably doing, oh yo, this work. It's the same play over and over. It's a cookie cutter. That's why, I mean, if you just, once you understand, all this stuff is just on paper. You know, I'm sure y'all hear, oh, you can claim whatever you want to claim and all of that stuff. Yeah, we know that now. But if you really look into that, you'll go back and claim that right stuff to get your land back, you know? And we have to dig. We have to see where we were classified at. We have to see where all of this paperwork leads to. We have to see, you know, see what we was doing before that. Like, we really have to sit down and really, once again, investigate exactly what has been done to us. You know, what we allow to be done to us. Because they're not just walking over us like, oh, do this, do that, and oh, give me this or give me that. Nah, nobody, all of that, oh, oppressed and oh, nah. All they doing is setting up. If I have a cookout and I say, yo, cuz, bring your family, that's it. If a random people come trying to get some food, we gonna kick them out. Nah, we don't know you. You can't just go to the grill and just pick up no food. You ain't introduce yourself or nothing. That's all they doing. They gatekeeping. They got a system that they set up. They made it look good. We volunteered into their system. Oh, y'all got to be called this if you want to be in this system. We're going to reclassify you. You want to be over here? Just like when you go to a job today. When you go to a job, okay, whatever your name is employee number whatever. That's it. You might get recognition if you do good. You know what I'm saying? But that's all they doing, man. You have to understand, they set up a system. If you want to be in the system, you got to be called this. That's the reclassification. Are you comfortable with that? Yes, sign here. And that's all we doing. We sign every time you go into a courtroom, every time you sign some paperwork with the government, you signing yourself deeper and deeper and deeper into their system, you know? Reclassify yourself as what they tell you they want you to be. You know what I'm saying? I think we need to get to that, you know what I'm saying? Get to the root of that, man. And, you know, take it forward.
So the historical story is 12 million African slaves were brought from Africa and brought to build up, you know, the United States. And this is documented. 1619 is the famous year that we hear in the, you know, in academia, social political academia. So the critical question is, if you're a thief, right, and you're going to steal something, you know how to identify what you stole, right? Because that's what you're stealing. So let's say if you're going into a store, you know, in a jewelry store, and there's a particular diamond that you know is going to make, you know, if you break it down, it can make X amount of, you know, money, get your cash flow going, right? You know what that diamond is. You know how it's classified. You know what it looks like. You know, it's not going to change names because it is what it is. So the critical question that what we don't hear in the academic community, the social political community, if you stole 12 million people who you said are Africans from one place and transported them to another place, how can you not know who they are? How do you not know who they are? Right? That's a lot. We didn't say 12 people. The narrative is 12 million slaves, right? Were forced to travel this middle passage from Africa to America. But for some reason, when it comes to these same so-called 12 million slaves from Africa, don't nobody know what to call us. So in social, political, and through the census, we were never labeled Africans. From earlier on, right? We weren't labeled Africans. We're labeled colored, we're labeled mulattoes, Negroes, black, African American. You know, that's a more newer term of the 21st century. We know in 1988, we thank Reverend Jackson for that. We weren't ever called Africans. So the question is, why did it take you almost 300 years from the story of the famous 1619 transatlantic beginning of the 12 million slaves to call us African Americans? That's just a really good question. And that was one of the critical questions from our white paper where we're documenting American genocide and going through the racial reclassifications of the Aboriginal copper-colored races of America. That's what we were called. In 1828, Webster's Dictionary, you look up the word American, it still is written, and I have that. I think maybe the next time, next interview, I could bring that book down and show you. It clearly says that the Americans were the Aboriginal copper-colored races of the inhabitants that were found here. So you have that piece, and then you have this 12 million slave piece. Something doesn't add up, right? And then from being the Aboriginals of the land, we go to American Indios. Then we go to being colored. They dropped the copper part, now we're just colored. And from colored, we're Negroes. From Negroes, we're mulattoes. From mulattoes, we're back to colored. Then we're black. Then we're not black anymore. where Negroes and after a while, it's like it's like you're zigzagging back and forth. You're a thief, you're a colonizer, you're a murderer, and you went and stole 12 million people from one place to another. She has some pretty good documents, right? Because anybody who's, there's records. Thieves keep records, right? You can't make that many alleged slave ship journeys and not have the records. Where are these records for 12 million people that you were confused about for like 300 years, and it took you to 1980s, 1988 to call us Africans? Something's wrong with that picture.
Now, with all the information we've sat and gone through, and as much as we've learned about this guy, Walter Plecker, and how he had a very big influence in reclassifying the American Indian to colored, to Negro, to black, to now African American, we have to now start connecting the basic dots. If the American Indian looks like the elders in your family that told you they had Indian in them, and many of them were called the racial slur, the racial term nigger, which refers to the American Indian in the Oxford Dictionary, section 3. We have to start putting the dots together. In 1968, the Civil Rights Act, it was nicknamed the Indian Civil Rights Act. They were also fighting for public Indian housing. It was also nicknamed the Indian Bill of Rights. We have to start connecting the dots. Your elders, your own bloodline, told you they had Indian in them. This is where we start to put facts over feelings. It is a fact. Your elder told you they had Indian in them or they were Indian. It is a fact that your elder was called the racial slur, nigger. It is a fact that your elders were probably in the civil rights movement, marching with Dr. King for Indian civil rights. Start putting the basic dots together. I told you before, this is very much a make it make sense docuseries. We're not trying to go too deep, and we're not trying to go over your head. We first need you to connect the basic dots and make things make sense. Once again, if we're African, why were we fighting for Indian civil rights? What does an African benefit fighting for the rights of Indians? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense that your family members, your elders, went through everything, all the segregation and all the drama and the hurt and pain of the civil rights movement to fight for some Indians on a reservation who wasn't even out here in the fight with them. Yeah, this is where we make it make sense. Connect the basic dots. This is your story. This is the era. We have a lot more technology out here today. This is supposed to be the age of information. This is supposed to be the age of the awakening. Everyone's supposed to be so woke and enlightened and be able to see through the truth. But some of us can't even connect the basic dots because we would rather ignore what our bloodline told us to go with what the so-called oppressor taught us in their education system. Here's the thing. I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. You have to find a way to understand it yourself. With that being said, we'll see you next episode. Peace. Our story. 1968, Season 1, Indian Civil Rights Act. See you next time.